Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize for the delay in starting our meeting, but welcome to the combined workshop and special meeting of your Board of Trustees. To honor our nation's heroes and especially to honor the men and women in uniform who serve and protect our community, please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk Horvath, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam President. Trustee Chen.
Here.
Trustee Fink.
Here.
Trustee John.
Here.
Trustee Rudolph.
Here.
Trustee Sifferman.
Here.
And Trustee Terrell.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Before we get to our agenda items today, we have sad news of our friend Patricia Fitzgerald passed away 2 weeks ago. She's mother of a former clerk, Bridget Fitzgerald, and she was also a former chair of our Safety and Transportation Commission. So we mourn her loss, and I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in her memory, please. Thank you very much. Moving on to our agenda, having read the agenda, does any trustee have any addition or deletion tonight? Hearing none, we'll pass it over to our water plant superintendent, Erin Duffy, for her report on the status of our well number 3. Erin. Good evening.
Good evening. So since the last time I was here, we wrapped up repairs on the pump and motor for well number 3, and we set the pump and motor on Monday, August 26th, and then began pushing the 900 feet of column pipe. That took approximately a week, 4 days, and on Friday, August 30th, we were able to energize the well and begin doing our test pumping. We pumped throughout holiday weekend, so Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and then we performed our initial back tee on Tuesday, September 3rd, and we also did our pump tests on that day, so we put back pressure on the pump and monitored the flows that proceeded. Our first back tee came back positive. However, our 3 subsequent tests on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday came back negative. So we buttoned up the well on Friday, September 6th, and then pushed the well to distribution. As you can see from the table that's on the slide, the water quality values are starting to equalize, and we're starting to get back to normal, which normal would be represented by the averages from July 1st through July 31st. August 1st through September 6th was when we were using well number 1, and then beginning September 7th was our first full day with well number 3 back to distribution. So we should start to see those values go back to normal.
Mm-hmm. Will you still continue to test daily until they are back to a norm?
We're required to test 3 times a day. So
Oh.
we do that all the time,
All the time, no matter,
no matter what.
okay. And you're posting those numbers on our website?
I have through August 27th on the website now. I can update those now that things are settling down.
Thank you.
Of these, I don't know what these are, these figures in the column, which is the one that we should be focusing on regarding the villagers' issues with the, is it iron, or is there something else in addition to it? Or is it all of them?
So I know iron is a major concern, and that's where we get a lot of our discoloration. But I know quite a few residents had an issue with TDS, and as you can see in the rightmost column, that is starting to normalize as well.
TDS means what?
Total dissolved solids.
Okay. Or now it's 388 something, whereas we want to get it down to 265. Okay.
And what's the highest that you can have with the EPA?
So
That's
TDS
for
carries a
TDS.
secondary MCL.
Okay.
So it's more of like a recommendation, it's not enforced.
Okay.
And that's 500 parts per million. So
Okay.
as you can see, our average was over that for August 1st through September 6th. So
Okay.
we're now under that.
So the secondary MCL is because it goes to aesthetics of the water, but not to health.
Taste, odor,
Mhm.
discoloration.
Mhm.
And question about well number 1, does it get treated through the RO system?
No, it does not get treated
Okay.
through the RO system, but
Okay.
it does undergo chemical treatment.
Okay. Okay. And it doesn't go through the RO system because we don't have the infrastructure to put it there, or is there another?
It's due to the water quality
Yeah.
that comes from well one. It
Yes.
would significantly scale our membranes.
Right, that's what I was conjecturing, is why it doesn't go through the RO system, okay.
Can you project when, given this course, the readings of September 7th through the 9th, can you estimate how long it would take to get back to the 265 mark?
I can't. I would probably say about a week,
Okay.
to be certain.
Well, that's,
But hydrology in the system is unpredictable.
The
thanks.
water ban is still in place though, correct?
Through the 13th, I believe, yes.
And why is that?
Because we started to drain our standpipe for the tank maintenance and repainting,
Okay.
and we're still currently draining the standpipe.
Is there any difference with the well number water when it goes through the distribution? I don't want to raise what happened in a certain place in Michigan, but when they changed water, bad things happened with corrosion and things in the water mains, and then obviously the distribution directly to people's
So
houses.
when we utilize well number one,
Yeah.
that chemical treatment that it
Yeah.
undergoes is
Right.
corrosion, a corrosion inhibitor,
Mhm.
and we have to use a separate corrosion inhibitor for well number one's water.
Okay, so you have it treated with everything it needs to go into distribution, because it is different water
Correct,
than the other 2 deep water wells, okay.
correct.
And Erin, I know last time you showed us a photo of the submersible cable that was the original cause of this incident. Was there any further kind of information or discovery as to why that failed? Because, to me, I'm separating kind of what happened that caused the incident and then what has been done subsequently and the time that it takes to get the water back to where we want it to be. But is there anything that we can point to or that we have confidence that we're not gonna see it again?
Well, we purchased a new submersible cable, so we shouldn't see that again. We are still waiting on the final report from Suez,
Okay,
but because they did not do our last installation, they won't place blame or make any assumptions on what the actual cause for that was.
When do we expect that report?
I'm hoping early next week.
Okay.
And should the consumers of the water, should they see immediate improvement, or will it take days to get through the system or anything like that?
They should have seen a significant
Okay.
improvement already, yes,
in particular with the color
Okay.
because of the iron?
yes,
So that's kind of one of the most immediate changes, right?
correct.
And is it correct, and I don't want to kind of relitigate the last 5 weeks, but are different residents throughout the course of this, do they experience sort of different water quality throughout the time period? Because I have seen and heard a lot of different water experiences, and is it
Yes,
different?
and that's pretty typical in normal operation as well,
Okay,
Mm.
okay.
Is there a reason for that?
not that I know of, no.
Not a geographic or,
I'm sure Director Super might be able to answer that better than I can.
Because there are different times when different residents are posting, photos of very, very discolored water, and in my house, I'm not seeing that. And it's hard for me to understand why I appreciate that throughout the village, we have different age of our water mains, et cetera, and suspect that's part of it.
Probably, yes.
Okay.
Plus maybe where you are in the looping, or if there is a loop.
There's a dead end.
Right.
There are quite a few dead ends in Ridgewood.
Oh, right.
Right.
And throughout that time period, and with these numbers that we see August 1st through September 6th, that those averages and all of those numbers during that time period, it was still safe.
Yes,
We would have taken other steps had it not been safe.
correct, yes.
We would not distribute water
We
that
would
is
not.
not safe. Bottom
So
line.
for human or pet, any consumption, use in food, et cetera, those all were within safe standards.
you put these numbers out daily, or was it a task to put this together? And the reason why I'm asking is perhaps some of the villagers will want to look next week to see if,
So I have posted up through August 27th, from August 1st through August 27th, the daily averages are posted on the website now.
for all these categories?
Yes,
Okay.
but I have not gotten to update it since then.
And you anticipate putting them on daily?
Probably not daily, maybe weekly, just until I see them return to normal.
And you're almost there, right? You got 388 now, and you want to get down to 265. And we don't know how to judge how that 120-point difference might be, but I'm just thinking of a way for people to keep track of that, so they can see it themselves.
And do you anticipate continuing your weekly updates on the website, or do you?
I'll put them on the website just until it returns to normal, but
Okay.
then I'll go back to just the monthly update.
Okay. I think that would be helpful too.
To follow up on Trustee Rudolph's question, I think it would be useful to get the answer to why different residents experience different, if it's possible. If it's not possible,
And that's why Director
Yeah.
Supert is going to address the
Right.
board on that, because that has
Okay.
to do with distribution of the water.
okay, okay, that's coming up later.
Yes.
Okay.
Immediately following this.
Okay. And then I guess my other question is, in the the RO system went up in 2013, it's 2019. How many times have we had experiences where we had to go down to just 2 wells, I guess, in the last maybe 5 years?
So in 2015, well number 3 went through a normally scheduled
Maintenance.
overhaul.
Okay,
That would have been the regular, I think it was 12 years at that point, which is recommended 7 to 10 years.
mhm,
And then in 2017, we had the electrical accident, and then that damaged the above-ground electrical components for the well, in the well house. And then most recently here in 2019, we had the electrical failure due to the submersible cable.
okay, so 3 times, basically, in the
Well, no,
last-
we did the maintenance of the well in
2015
2015,
was a
which is a
regular
regular
maintenance.
maintenance. And then we did have the arching incident.
The arc flash.
Yes, the arc flash. That was in
Okay.
2017, and then now in 2019. And hopefully, when we have well number 5 up and running, that we don't have to use well number 1.
Right.
But
And
we
so-
will still keep it for the,
No.
No.
Oh, we're
No,
shutting
we
it
will
down
be-
completely.
We will
Cap
be
it.
capping
oh,
that,
capping it.
yes.
We'll have
And-
3 and 5.
Correct, yeah, 3, 5, and 4.
3, 5.
And there is a certain procedure that we have to go through also with regard to capping that the IEPA has set for us.
But it's obvious that the water that's produced from well number 1 just is not aesthetically pleasing. It's not something that we want to distribute to our residents. And so once we have the redundancy built in with the deep well, then there's no reason to keep that as a backup.
I'm gonna go also back to just another kind of just understanding of when we do have any kind of issue, we're kind of solving it ourselves. And please, I know we have talked about this in other meetings, but can you remind me of why we don't go to, or we aren't able to utilize any of our neighboring communities? Is it a volume and demand issue?
So, our neighboring communities have a little bit of room in their allocation, obviously, and we have emergency connections. But those emergency connections are for true emergencies, meaning when we don't have a water source at all.
Okay.
And in this case, we still had well number 4
I see.
and well number 1, which were able to meet our demand.
I see. Okay. So in the event that, for example, any of these numbers had been at unsafe,
Correct.
where we couldn't distribute, that's an emergency,
That's
in
an
which case
emergency.
those agreements, et cetera,
Would
can
come
be
into practice.
utilized. I
Yes.
see. Okay, thank you. I had forgotten that. Thank you.
Any other questions of Superintendent Duffy? I want to thank you for your time, for your quick response throughout all of this. You really, your decisive actions, you and the entire staff, Matt Super, I'm sure have shaved days, if not weeks, off this crisis so that we can get back to providing our residents with the water that they deserve as soon as possible. So thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead.
And now, Mr. Super, Director Super, that is, if you could please come up and provide us with an update on the IEPA projects that we have ongoing, and then also if you could address the distribution system too.
Thank you, President Gallagher and the board. I'll go ahead and first address Trustee Chen's question regarding distribution and how different people in the village. There's no one answer to why different people experience different water quality throughout the village. Some of the different factors come into play. Could be age of the system in front of your home, size of the pipe, the type of water usage your neighborhood or even your block is using. Different demographics in the communities, different water in different volumes and different types of the day. As Superintendent Duffy mentioned earlier, we have certain sections of the town, especially along the fridges or in the far southern area where we have dead ends in the system, especially in cul-de-sac areas. So in those particular areas, you tend to have water that might be sitting in the pipes for a long time because there's no way for it to circulate, especially during the day when people are at work. Other parts of the town, we noticed where the water can actually change directions in the pipe. So certain parts of town, it's all based on hydrology. Water can flow consistently in one direction. Some of our backbone pipes tend to do that, and that usually creates more consistency in your water than you experience in your home. We have other portions in certain neighborhoods where water can change flow, and that really just depends on how different parts of the town or different neighborhoods are using the water. Whenever the flow changes in the pipe, that can cause sediment or the particulate matter that's adhering to the inside of the pipe to get stirred up and it becomes more prevalent. So there's no one specific thing we can point to, but there's various different factors that do come into play.
Okay.
I do want to also just make one comment earlier when Aaron was expanding upon the well number 3 issues. The 3 issues we've had in the past with well number 3 have not been related to the RO treatment process at all. Those are completely separate. One's a production source issue. The RO treatment process kind of stands independently of the sources that are feeding it. The 3 issues that we had with the well, one was scheduled. One, we had an electrical failure that was caused, by a contractor who was at the surface level in the well house, caused an arc flash, which is an electrical accident. That was a human error issue with a contractor, and then this most recent issue, we had some sort of equipment failure that occurred down in the well shaft. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit before I get into the IEPA project updates. So with that, I'll update on the IEPA projects that we have going on within the village. There are essentially 3 projects we have going on. The first, probably the biggest one we have going on is the new well number 5, which is being drilled out in Field Park. As of last Friday, the contractors have successfully drilled down to 1,250 feet, which is basically where we're going to end up with the depth of the well. So the drilling portion is nearing its end. The process this week, they will begin cementing the casing pipe, which will extend the first several hundred feet. Beyond that, you're basically in bedrock, and you don't need a casing pipe further down the well. That process will probably take the majority of this week, with approximately 72 hours to cure that process. And then once that's completed, probably early next week, we will see them begin to extract the drilling equipment. So that process is moving on very well. There is a third phase of this project. Once that's all done, that will happen later next year. The village board will be seeing some information, and that's namely the pumping equipment that has to go down into the well, as well as some modifications at the water treatment plants that need to allow the new well to be brought in and then be brought through the RO process. That will all happen probably sometime this winter or early spring. We're just beginning the IEPA loan application process now. So there'll be documentation going to the village board sometime this fall.
So when do you expect to see what water you out of there?
We'll see some initial water information probably end of this month, early October. Then we'll get some of our water quality data. I know Aaron will be working with the village's engineer on the project, Baxter and Woodman Associates, and that will kind of, once we have that water quality information, that will determine what we do at the water treatment plant for the modifications for the third phase. It'll help us determine which RO skid would be the primary skid that we would run the new well through.
And excuse me, but for the IEPA loan, do you have to show certain steps to get disbursement?
There's
or-
not nothing related to the water quality or anything like that. We
Yeah.
have, it's treated as a regular construction project where we have progress
Oh,
meetings
oh, so you-
and then there's submittals from the contractor.
I see.
Once those submittals come into the village, they'll be sent off to the IEP for processing, and then there'll be a disbursement of funds.
Works. Okay, okay.
Ma'am, can I ask, right now, we're drilling 24/7, correct?
Correct.
How long will that be going on?
I don't have I know it'll continue at least through the end of this week.
Okay,
There are gonna be a couple days where they're not doing any work at all as they wait for that casement pipe and the cement to cure, so there won't be any substantial work on site. But in terms of scheduling, it will continue at least through this week. We'll have an update, probably this Thursday or Friday if it needs to continue into next week.
okay.
We do have, once the well drilling is complete, which we targeted for mid-September, there's a 30-day kind of buffer period in there that if we need to do what's known as well development, to either drill a little bit more or develop the well to get more output out of it, we have a 30-day period to work on that. That work probably would not be 24 hours, that would probably be a single shift, but we don't know at this point until we kind of get some water quality coming from the well.
I see. So about another week or two for the,
Of substantial drilling work,
okay,
yes.
thank you.
Does that mean that the area around the drilling will be removed, or
So,
Given the-
the construction site and the construction fencing will remain at least through this second phase of the project. We'll have to work with the engineer. Once that drilling portion is done, we will probably shrink the construction fence up so it encapsulates just the village's right-of-way area and remove our construction temporary easements off of the park district and school property. We will have to keep a construction fence in place when we do the electrical building, which will be the third phase. Because we don't know exactly what the timeline is on that, we may tear down the construction fence and put a new one up, or if that comes soon enough, we may keep that in place and just shrink the construction site.
How about dropping the pump down there?
I'm sorry.
What's involved with dropping the pump down or the,
Almost the exact same process that we experienced with our current wells when we pull them. So you'll have a derrick crane basically set up behind there. The shaft will be open and drilled, and then they will basically drop the pump and motor system in, and then they'll attach the casement pipe behind that, and that will basically pump it back up to the surface.
it's done by robots, and, I mean, how do you,
No, it's actually remarkably similar to how the oil and gas industry does their work. So it's literally 10 to 15 foot sections of pipe that's threaded. It's threaded at the surface level, either using a power clamp or by hand, and they literally just kind of fish it down through the pipe. So tied into that, the well number 5 project we have, there's a transmission main that's being constructed to bring the water ultimately to Field Park to the water treatment plant. Most of that project was completed in July. They did a mechanical boring process along the south side of Hillgrove Avenue. There's a remaining phase of that project which we'll be completing this fall, probably around Columbus Day in October. We've been coordinating with the school. The last portion of that project will require some open trenching across Hillgrove Avenue. That means we'll have to close Hillgrove Avenue for a couple days while we do that open trenching. We've coordinated with the school to do that probably around Columbus Day because the school will be closed for that Monday, and they have an institute day on that Tuesday as well. Last IEPA project we have is the standpipe, which Aaron already referenced to. We were already in the process of draining that. If you happen to go out there and take a look, you'll see there's basically scaffolding which is going in place along the edge of it. We anticipate that once we finish draining it, which we hope will be tomorrow, maybe in the next 2 days or so, we will begin the sandblasting process. So the contractor will start on the interior, sandblast the interior of the tank, begin their priming on the inside, paint the seams and the weld joints. Then they'll sandblast the exterior. do the same on that process, and then ultimately they'll do the painting, the final painting, all in one phase for the interior and exterior.
That won't have any impact on the water supply when it's drained.
No, it's been off already for at least
Oh.
since Friday.
Okay,
And we actually did a test run
Yeah.
isolating the tank for about a
Okay.
week this past spring.
okay,
And we did not notice any substantial issues in the distribution system.
okay. How many gallons is that tank?
2 million gallons? 2 million gallons.
Oh, okay,
It takes a long time to drain it.
yeah.
It's been going since Friday, and we're still draining. There was about, as of this morning, there was about 14 feet of elevation left in the tank, so. And it's draining slower now as we get down, because there's less head pressure on it to drain.
And where is it draining to?
The sewer, there's a sewer right outside
Oh.
with the construction fence area that we
Oh.
fenced off. We're
Huh.
draining right to the sewer system. It's clean potable water, that's just basically going to the sewer.
Okay,
And how long is that project expected to take?
We're looking at about 2 months total time for the sandblasting and painting process.
Okay. So before winter hits and we should be back
Yes.
up and, okay. And then there's also the Spring Rock Park,
Yes, so we just got our preliminary information from Baxter Woodman and the IPA on that. We're going to be scheduling a conference call probably in the next few weeks, probably next month, to talk about that project. We don't know exactly if it's going to fall in the 2020 or 2021 IEPA loan disbursement schedule, so we're still working through that process right now.
okay,
We do have several other IEPA projects down the pipeline, as the board all recalls. We have a 5-year capital project. Scope identified with the IEP projects. That also includes Clausen Avenue, which I'll touch base here in a second, as well as some water main improvements on Rose and Grove, and then also the elevated tank. The Clausen Avenue project, which is the last IEPA project we're working on right now for this year, from Ogden Avenue down to 41st Street, we actually completed today that changeover for the new water main. That project was the replacement of the 4-inch water main, upgrading it to an 8-inch as part of the road reconstruction program. So all of the residents in that area are on the new water main as of this afternoon.
wonderful. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to kind of close this out with regard to the issues surrounding well number 3, I do want to say that staff posted at least weekly updates on the status of the well, and we would have posted more frequent updates had there been any activity that needed to be sent out to our residents. That's on our website, wsprings.com. You can also get the water plant's reports on the quality of the water through our website. I would also recommend, if you are not part of the Code Red system, to please go on the website. There is a link right on our homepage that you can click on. So residents that do not have a landline are not automatically on. If you have a landline, you are automatically on our Code Red notification system. But if you do not have a landline, then you need to take that extra step to join our Code Red notification, which I urge every resident to do. And finally, I'd like to thank residents for their patience and their understanding. We know that you deserve better water than what you get when we blend in well number 1 water, and the board is taking steps to ensure that that doesn't happen again, as well as staff. So, thank you. We'll move on to citizen comments. This is the portion of the meeting that we open it up to the public to address the board. Please come on up. First hand raised.
Dave Clement, 4556 Wolf Road, Western Springs.
I did.
I was a member of the Infrastructure Committee for approximately 9 years and chair for about a year and a half. I resigned because they weren't going ahead with well number 5, so what I want to do is praise President Gallagher for pushing ahead with well number 5 because I couldn't get it done in the last administration.
Well, thank you, but it's not me, but thank you.
Well, the whole board, that's what it amounts to. But there are a couple of questions I have, and one of them relates both to well number 3 and well number 5 and goes to Trustee Rudolph's question, which is assessing blame. When Aaron had showed the picture of the cable termination, it's obviously that's where the short circuit occurred in well number 3. So that means to me that the electrical subcontractor performed an inadequate wrapping of the termination between the motor pigtails and the cable. Now, both the cable and the motor are tested in the factory before they come to the site, and then usually you do a field test before you install it again. So the weak link here is the termination from the cable to the motor. So this is at 2400 volts. Now, I have a good electrician for my house, but I wouldn't put him over 480 volts. So this person that Matt uses, and Matt, the question is to you actually, has to have NETA certification, National Electrical Testing Association certification, to show that he's competent in making these terminations. And I know what you would look for in an above ground 2400 volt termination, but underground is, underwater is even more severe. So what you have to be looking at, and this pertains both to well number 3 and well number 5, is that the electrical subcontractor that the well manufacturer, that the well installer has the certification, and that he knows what he's doing for the testing, and that when he does the testing, he uses the correct Megger test to do it. Megger test being an insulation resistance test. You have a 2400 volt cable, so you have to have at least a 2500 volt Megger equipment test to do this on. You can go higher, you can go 5000 volts. But what you're doing is you're checking how good the insulation is, and you take the readings at 30 seconds to see that they're okay, and then you take them at 60 seconds, and then you take them at 2 minutes, and the amount of leakage current that goes through that insulation should be less as the time period goes further along. But this all depends on your electrician and his certification and his filling out of the test certificates. So the question to the village goes to who looks at these test certificates and confirms that he used the proper equipment and that he signed off on the test certificate. And if Matt can't do it, and I don't think he can, I have an electrical engineering background, by the way, so that's why
I kind of thought.
fairly good to me, and I've been through a lot of these tests. But then you have to go to your village engineer, and I've seen the village engineer, and he's good on a number of projects and aspects, but I don't think I've seen anybody who's an electrical engineer on that staff. Now, that doesn't mean he can't get somebody. He can get somebody who can certify or check it, but you have to have somebody who's knowledgeable.
Right.
Review this to make sure you don't get into the same problem again on well number 3. I mean, if the same electrical subcontractor is doing the termination again, you may have another failure in 2 years.
Right, which,
What amounts to it on these terminations, if you don't do them exactly right, you have little sparks that go off every second, and over a period of time it degrades the insulation, and then you have a short circuit, which is what the picture that Aaron showed on the cable termination tells me you had down there.
Right.
And that's when you blow the fuse, because the fuse is there to stop massive amounts of currents from
ruining
continuing
the
to go
motor.
down. Yeah,
Right.
ruining everything else also.
Yeah.
So this also pertains to well number 5, because if you're using the same electrical contractor on well number 5, you're going to run into the same problem again. So the electrical testing is very important. Okay, that's the first point on electrical testing.
Well, all valid points, thank you.
Second point is assessing blame. Whoever made this termination, whichever electrical contractor made it for whichever well installer you had, I would say you could assess blame to him. Now, Aaron said something about you have a different well installer or something here, so nobody wants to say, you know, he did it. But in fact, it was a bad electrical connection. So whoever the electrical subcontractor was, and I don't know who's the lawyer on this board, but
He's
Raise
ready.
the hand.
you can,
I'm taking good notes.
you can,
I may be calling you.
well, you can probably say, you know, that's where the failure occurred. Your guy did it. So that's the problem. Whether you get free services from them or something back from them, but you should also know not to use that electrical subcontractor again, right?
We are looking into that.
Pardon?
We're looking into that.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, that's about all I had, because the electrical portion of this is very important. Now, Aaron did say you had some pump corrections on well number 3 when you pulled it up already. And that also tells me that who's the mechanical subcontractor on this, if there is one. You shouldn't have problems after 2 years. If you put the well in, it should be good for 8 to 10 years, both the pump and the motor and the cable connection, right? So again, it goes
Agreed.
to competence of the people that you're hiring and who they're subcontracting to and stuff.
Yes.
Okay, that's about it. And then I want to say
Thank
one
you.
more time, thanks for pushing well number 5 forward, because that was quite disgusting for me when I couldn't get it done in the last administration, so.
Well, thanks. It's the efforts of staff and the board, so thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Clemens. Anybody else? Mr. Vespa, how are you?
Hello, Vespa, 906 London Court. So I appreciated the update tonight. I think, President Gallagher, you had a very fair comment towards the end of that, which was about safe. And I understand all the metrics that can be shown up on a board and everything, but at the end of the day, as a resident and as a parent, it's not safe to me if it smells and it has discoloration. I'm sure if you were to pour something from here and your clean water there had a color to it, none of you would be drinking it tonight. None of you would want to give it to your kids at home, and neither would I. But in looking at some of this, I found something that was very interesting to me, and I guess I wanted to ask about it as it relates to wells 3 and 4 and potentially well number 5. So on the, and I'll make this quick, on the village website for water, it talks about the process that our water goes through. And to summarize, it says that from wells 3 and 4, the water goes through an AMIAD iron removal system.
yes.
And then goes through another cartridge filter vessels that helps also take out any of the iron that wasn't caught through the first process, which then goes to the RO system, which then goes to the reservoir, which then goes to high service pumps, to the water tower, and then to our homes. And that's a diagram that's on the water website. But what I found interesting, and I want to make sure I quote it correctly because I printed it off the website, it says right at the end, as you describe an AMIAD iron removal system, and I'll just quote it, following the initial pre-treatment of all the raw water, a portion of the water from each well is bypassed and sent directly to the reservoir to allow for adjustments to taste and texture. So those items never go through the cartridge filter vessels, according to the website, the RO system, and go directly to it. And it further states that approximately 35% of the raw water from well 3 and 45% of the raw water from well number 4 does not undergo any further treatment in the plant outside of the chlorination in the reservoir. It was the first time as a resident I was not aware, or I was unaware, that almost on average 45% of the water that gets distributed to our homes does not go through the reverse osmosis system. That was a staggering amount to me to read that from the village website, because I thought, hey, we've got this reverse osmosis system, all our water's going through, and the other interesting thing is the diagram doesn't depict this. The diagram on the village website indicates that all water is going through the reverse osmosis system. So I guess two things. One, I wanted to clarify, is that true? That 35 to 45%, depending upon the wells, never touches the additional filtering of the cartridge filter vessels, the reverse osmosis. It's all bypassing the reverse osmosis system. And the follow-up to that is, what percentage of that is going to happen with well 5 that will not go through the reverse osmosis system? And why does such a large percentage not go through the reverse osmosis system? I'll sit for that, but that's my
Okay.
question.
I should probably hand it over to Superintendent Duffy. I think there is such a thing where you need to blend it to get the quality. There's such a thing as over processing the water, but Superintendent Duffy, you are much more qualified to address it than I am.
So yes, so basically there is such a thing as overprocessing the water, and pure reverse osmosis water is not good for you. It's actually more corrosive in nature, and it's not good for you to be drinking pure RO water. And that's why we do the blending back for taste and texture, because water has a mineral taste in it, and you can taste that. If we were to send you pure reverse osmosis water, not only would we have a problem in our distribution system because it would be more corrosive, but it would also not taste the same to you. And that's why we blend back. And as for your question regarding well number 5, we won't be able to assess that until we actually know the water quality specs that we're getting out of well 5.
Is there a reason though, that the water?
Mr.
That
Vespa, I'm
percentage?
sorry, can you come
Yeah,
up?
sorry.
Yeah.
Microphone there's, or maybe there is now.
It is.
Can you explain though, why does, I understand what you're saying about the reverse osmosis system, but why doesn't all water go through the cartridge filter vessels to do an extra set of cleaning before it comes to the residents?
So the reason it only goes through the Amiot is it takes care of the iron removal. The reason that the water that goes to the reverse osmosis system goes through the extra cartridge vessels is so that we don't scale our membranes, because the iron would then continue to scale the membranes. So scaling is basically like, when you know how you have a clog in your sink, that's what it would do to the membrane. So in order to prevent that, we have it go through an additional filtration before that water that's going through the RO system.
It's like a line buildup kind of thing, the scale, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. Would anyone else like to address the board this evening? Of course.
I have a question about that. When he said that
Please state your
35
name again.
Oh, I'm
afraid-
sorry.
no.
Bev Moon, 4059 Wolf Road,
Thank you.
Western Springs. That percentage of homes that doesn't go through that process, is it the same homes in that percentage? Or, you know, I mean, when he said, what did you say, the percentage, 35?
I said that of all the water, 35% of well 3 and 45% of well 4 does
Oh.
not go through the reverse osmosis system.
Okay, I misunderstood, sorry. Okay, actually, I've got some good news and some bad news. Last time I talked to you at the last meeting, my TDS, the total dissolved solids was 671, and as measured by the water department here in Western Springs. But Sunday I took it, and it went down to 352, so woo-hoo.
Wonderful.
That was very, very pleasing to my family. And the other thing is that I did send my water sample out to a private lab, and they did find uranium in it. So, and that, the federal goal for uranium is 0. Mine was a low percentage, it was like 0.002. But still, I mean, so saying that the water is safe kind of scared me. I mean, not only with the color and the smell, but now knowing that I could be glowing, kind of worries me a bit. But anyway, it is going down to 352. I'm very pleased with that. And that is it. So,
Would you be willing to share your results from your private lab testing with our water department?
okay, that we sent it out to Tap Score Simple Water, and actually my daughter went through the envelope that, thank you, Erin, that they were all the same, except it did not include the uranium on the village, unless I'm missing it somewhere. I don't know.
When we sent that out, we did not test that, no. And that's
Okay.
not a normal test we would perform on a
Okay,
sample.
otherwise my daughter, she figured it all out, because the
Oh.
measurements were, how they measured were different. You've got MG/L, and on my other report was something else, but my daughter calculated it all, and she says, oh, very, very similar with everything that the village had. The outsource was, you know, very similar, but, the
Would you
village.
mind sharing those results with Erin, and we
Sure.
can look into that further?
Sure,
Thank you.
I could. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Less than
much.
3 minutes.
Anyone else this evening? No. Hearing none, we'll move on to the consideration of our agenda items during the workshop portion of our meeting tonight. Agenda item number 1 is the report from the Properties and Recreation Commission, Committee. Trustee Chen.
Okay, thanks. It's a pretty brief update, just a couple projects to update the board and residents on. The historical tower front door replacement has been awarded, and the work is being scheduled. When is the work scheduled to begin?
We're probably looking at another 4 to 6 weeks, probably.
Okay.
As we discussed during the committee meeting
Yeah.
tonight, we got the shop drawings for the door
Right.
designed today.
Yeah.
We're looking at approximately 4 to 5 weeks of manufacture on that.
Okay, oh, right, because it's a custom door, so it does take a bit, so. That's that update. And then the east train platform construction, there has been positive development that the contractor has been working on the punch list items that were remaining finally, such as the concrete work is underway and whatnot. But there are a few items that we're working with IDOT on to get addressed, and but the positive news is that the punch list is getting addressed. It took quite a while.
Can I ask a
yes.
quick
Yeah.
question? I don't know if it's on the punch list.
Yeah.
Just being a consistent user of the platform, especially during heavy rains, the drainage does not seem to be great. Is that part of the punch list?
Yeah, so some of the drainage was on the punch list item. The drainage is very difficult on the platform, so the previous design, the previous platforms were allowed to drain towards the railroad tracks. As part of the new construction, the BNSF said, no, you can't drain it, you have to drain it back towards the wall. Due to elevations, that pitch on the platform is extremely shallow. So
Right.
we have addressed some of those in the punch list, and we're continuing to work through those. We might not be able to have 100%, but the goal is to have that water all channeled towards the drain inlets, which are designed against the retaining wall.
Yep, okay.
Anything else on the east platform? Okay, and then lastly, in the capital summary report, the Wolf Road Bike Path, again, positive developments. It sounds like, or what we were reported to today, that there's one more internal sign-off from IDOT on the pre-final project report. And then with the Federal Highway Administration, there is a meeting scheduled for September 17th that the village will be attending. And then the next phase is the Phase 2 engineering, which it looks like, well, we were told that that was going to be going to bid. And then the next stage after that would be an IGA with the Forest Preserve. So there's still a lot of steps. I guess this project has been going on for a while, or the consideration for this project, but things are moving along slowly. As we discussed in our committee, there's a lot of government entities involved, so it's taking quite a bit to get everybody to sign off and do all the things that they have to do. So, yep, I think that's pretty much it on the facilities. And then lastly, from the Recreation Committee, just an update that the C-SPAR sensory room is also moving forward. So hopefully some progress on that soon. So that's my report.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 2, Public Works and Water Committee, Trustee Fink.
The Ridgewood Oaks Detention Basin, it's going to bid in fall. There's a meeting scheduled with the Finance Committee later this month, and they're just going to determine interest rates and scheduling. The 2018 roadway program is, that's also at a punch list, so there's some cracked sidewalk that has to get repaired, and there's some trees that have to be repaired, and that probably won't happen until spring, because that's just a better time to plant trees. The road resurfacing program, that was, Lindahl Brothers were awarded the contract because they had the lowest bid, and work is going to start as soon as all the contracts are finalized. The project should take about 2.5 weeks with no roadway shutdown, so people should be able to just drive right through it. Central Avenue reconstruction and the sewer separation, again, Phase 1 and Phase 2 engineering has been approved, but this is a long-term project that won't start until September 2020. The West Suburban Mass Transit, that's the electrical charging station in the bike canopy at the train station. They're just waiting on the BNSF permit for the work there, and that'll take about 12 weeks for completion. The 2019 sewer televising, that's a requirement by the MWRD. After this year, we can just do it as needed, but the whole system had to be televised at once. So they're finishing the sanitary and storm sewers for Commonwealth, North Springdale, and Fairview Estates, and the combined sewers of Old Town North. So far, they did say they found some blockages, but that will have to be part of the plan to fix for next year. The smoke testing was completed. We're waiting for the final report. But the next step of that would just be talking to people about illegal hookups. And there is a correction to the motor fuel tax. So there's no budget amendments are needed, but we'd like to spend $109,642.50 for sidewalk replacement.
Oh.
That was an incorrect number that was given last month. And our last thing, the infrastructure committee met with some local residents in Forest Hills, and they wanted to look at ways that we can, Forest Hills has a kind of pockmarked sidewalks. So they have, a couple streets will have sidewalks, or a couple houses will have sidewalks, and then it just kind of dead ends into grass. And they're looking at a way to incorporate sidewalks throughout Forest Hills. And so as a first step, what they wanted to do is just send a very brief survey to all the Forest Hills residents, and just all this done in-house through SurveyMonkey. And if with that, you can just respond online, and if you can't respond, if you don't have a computer hookup, they can call their scores in. But really what they're looking at is, what's your address? Do you have a sidewalk in front of your house, and are you interested in paying for a sidewalk? So just to gauge interest of, is there enough people interested in sidewalks in Forest Hills to kind of go forward on a phase 1 plan?
So regardless of whether you have a sidewalk in front of your house or not, are you interested in paying for neighborhood sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay. Mhm.
Because
And
they
that's-
would have to create a special service area
Right.
to fund this.
And this is going out through the village or through,
Through the village, yes.
okay.
Do we not already have an inventory of where we have sidewalks and not?
This is more to garner interest, I think.
More to see
Okay.
if you have a sidewalk, are you still willing to pay for other people's
Oh, I
sidewalks?
see. Okay.
The committee felt that this was a prudent way to advance discussion on this before we spend a lot of money on an evaluation, a research, or any more of an expensive analysis of the needs and costs.
I think a phase 1 plan was estimated to be $50,000.
Yeah, that was a
Or-
very rough estimate from the staff level. We haven't really gone into any detail yet, and that's part of what the Infrastructure Commission's been exploring for the past 2 or 3 meetings that they've been meeting, really to gauge what sort of public interest there is in doing a public works project in this scope. Because of the special service area process, and in order to have it kind of encompassing, it would capture those residents who already have sidewalk as part of that process.
So has this survey been developed and is it going out? or-
No, so we have a very basic survey. It's essentially the 3 questions that are in the packet. We were just looking to see if there's any additional feedback from the board. As I mentioned, the Infrastructure Commission's met at least twice, if not 3 times, to kind of go over this. They elected to really keep the survey as simple as possible at this point. They didn't want to get into too many questions of how much would people be willing to pay or that sort of stuff. We really wouldn't have those answers until we get through a preliminary feasibility study to know what the project would cost or anything like that. So really, this is just gauging purely an interest level based on the 2 residents who've come to the Infrastructure Commission to solicit participation from the village to try to get a project going.
It seems like a prudent next step to me.
Matt, is there any further thought on the idea that perhaps the next step, advancing to the people that this would be sent to, that there would be, the next step would be a costly survey, more detailed survey? Would they support that? I mean, I think it's important for the residents to see that, you know, these are great ideas, but a lot of great ideas have a cost attached to them. And I think we should be very upfront about that another survey in more detail would cost the village money.
Yeah, so I know we talked at the committee level and the commission level, and we can talk about it here too, is we were absolutely going to talk about that a preliminary feasibility study would be required to get those cost estimates and get our project scope. We haven't quite finalized whether that would actually be a question of would you support a feasibility study or not. But we were at least going to have on the survey or on the postcard that we mailed out a statement on there that said the next step after this would be a feasibility study
Right.
that would occur.
And there would be an anticipated cost.
Yes.
Right.
A question about the Central Avenue work. That seems like that's been now pushed at least 6 months. Is that correct? It sounds like the timing has shifted quite a bit.
No, that's actually still on time. So we are targeting for an IDOT letting of September of next year.
Okay.
There's a submittal we have to submit to them, I think it's March or April. But the actual letting date would be targeted for 2020, end of 2020, with the construction to start in 2021. Because that's a, just go ahead.
The construction in 2021,
Yes.
okay,
Because that's a federally funded project,
okay.
for the road portion of it, there is a long lead time as we coordinate with the engineering. There is also, just as a note, we have an MWRD grant for a sewer portion of that project. We're working right now with the committee and with MWRD to finalize language for an intergovernmental agreement to get that money. The village has got an award of about $750,000 for sewer work. We anticipate that IGA to probably come to before the board in the October cycle.
And then I also have a question about the electrical charging station. 12 weeks to complete, but anticipated start is soon?
As soon as they get the BNSF permit done. And actually, it's I think the electrical, correct me if I'm wrong, the electrical charging station can be done quickly. It's more the lead time for the canopy for the bike shelter.
That's correct, yeah. So because of its adjacency, some of it is located in BNSF property, so they have to approve the work to occur in that area. The charging stations have a relatively short lead time. We're inspecting here probably the next couple of weeks for that portion of the work, but there is a longer lead time associated with the canopy for the fabrication of that.
So when can residents charge their cars? Do they have to wait for the bike canopy to be done?
It's really, no. we
They can
antici-
get it if it's only a couple weeks. from
Correct. We don't know we don't know exactly what the staging timeline is going to be for the construction at this point. But the canopy would likely be the last component to be installed anyway.
Okay, but separate in terms of actual functionality.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
It's not tied into each other. The bike canopy is going over the bike racks, which are
Right.
located just to the east.
Okay.
Really, at this point, we're just waiting for the BNSF to sign off on that permit.
And the
Access.
car charging accommodates 2 cars?
Yes, that's our goal.
Okay. And do we decide or if it's going to be free or is there a charge for the charge?
Village has not made that decision yet.
Okay.
Can I ask, where is the Central Avenue? Where is the?
Right
where-
along Spring Lot.
Okay, I was wondering if it was gonna be in that area, which there's a lot of activity around String Rock Park as it is in the next 4 years. So it is those 2 blocks of Central?
It is yes, basically from Burlington Avenue down to 47th Street.
Okay.
Is the target construction area for the road.
Yeah,
The sewer component doesn't expand that whole area. The sewer component of it will go from 47th Street to Elm, I believe it's Elm, and then continue east down Elm towards Lawn Avenue. And that portion of the project from the sewer grant we have is part of our long-term control plan with our NPDES permit.
okay,
Part of that process is the village is supposed to be making strides to separate our combined sewer system. That would
Sure, yeah.
help alleviate stormwater backup in basements and that sort of thing.
mhm,
Old Town South is identified as one of our critical basins, and this is a long way to setting a backbone in place to help begin that separation process.
okay. So that's why that portion was added to the portion that you talked about north of the tracks? You were saying,
North of the trail.
you were saying Central to Elm?
No.
I'm not,
That's central and then east.
Central to Burlington is the road construction process. Essentially, the
Okay.
entire east face of Spring Rock Park.
Right, okay. I thought they were saying there was some other, is Elm that street in between?
Elm runs right out of the
Is that in
small.
front of your house?
Yeah.
I do
Small
know where you
parking
live.
lot.
Yes. Yes.
I was thinking, is
Now
Elm on
everybody
the other
Right.
side of the tracks? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Right, so
Got
so the reason for my question about the timing,
Yeah.
and I had it wrong in my head, is that Spring Rock, just for usage,
Yeah.
will be impacted.
Well, yes,
Not to mention the combination with the shoe fly.
yes, and the
parking.
lack of parking
Right.
Right.
on that
So it's just
area.
a coordination.
Yeah,
of-
sure,
And,
Okay.
and an awareness.
Yeah,
Of
got it.
residents in the
Okay.
area.
Yeah.
sure.
But on the one hand, if you're going to be doing construction, you might as well do it.
I
All.
have come around to agree with that.
Okay, good.
As I will,
Sure.
as me and my neighbors, we will be directly impacted.
Yes. Thank you. Anything else, trustee Fink? And thank you for your report. Moving on to agenda item number 3, Planning and Zoning Committee, trustee Jen.
Sure, thank you. Just have one thing on the agenda this evening, about the affordable housing plan. And we're going to review the draft plan. We're looking for formal approval later on this month. So several years ago, I'll just do a quick recap. Several years ago, during the Blagojevich administration, they instituted an affordable housing mandate on select suburban communities based on income, housing costs, and other factors. The mandate had no significant regulatory element for teeth, and thus many communities did not comply. In our case, the village adopted a simple plan in 2005 with good intentions and understanding that options for affordable housing were limited. As we know, Western Springs redevelopment and tear downs is nearly 100% single home, family residential, making it difficult to implement affordable, attainable housing. The minor updates shown in the draft plan relate to percentage and unit changes based on formulas provided by the state. At this time, the staff is suggesting that we comply with the state by submitting a plan update before January 2020. In the future, staff recommends that we take a deeper look into affordable or attainable housing. This issue was raised at the board's past strategic planning meetings or sessions. It was a lower priority, but nonetheless, it's something that may need attention. At the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, we reviewed this issue at the July session and reached consensus that the proposal plan updates were reasonable. So our staff, the staff is seeking board feedback this evening, and if the board agrees that the minor updates are appropriate, we can place this item on the omnibus agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
Was the requirement that you just have a plan, or you identify how you might try to do it, but you don't have to meet that goal of 10%?
Correct.
Okay.
Right now, it's the plan by 2020.
Okay.
To submit the plan.
Submit the plan to
Just
January
to
2020.
submit a plan, but we
Correct.
don't have to.
Correct.
So I mean, per what you guys have, the housing stock has definitely decreased as far as affordable housing,
Right.
the edits that you made. Is that right? Is that because there was a decrease in multiple?
I'll let some.
Yeah.
Director Scott.
Great question, Trustee Chen. There's a couple different reasons. One is obviously we focus, or the market here focuses on single-family tear downs and build-backs. But then there's also the formula, which is on the kind of the hidden
Okay,
math
so
here.
is it just the formula?
There's some formula, yeah, that's
Okay.
behind this, that changes the math based on the communities and the county's income levels
Okay,
and
so
housing
it was
costs
those
that all
factors.
affect it.
Not necessarily that we lost any affordable housing stock, it was just the formula?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. So,
Okay.
that's the reason the math comes out that way. So regardless of the numbers, that's why we've said that there's some things to look at in the future, and look at some best practices from other communities and do something that we suggest is more meaningful than just what the state has suggested.
Thank you.
Could you flesh that out a little bit? Like what are the proposals, or is there hard numbers with this? Do they want a certain percentage of affordable housing?
Yeah, well, the initial, I wouldn't even say legislation, but the initial mandate was 10%.
Well, that's what I heard, but
Yeah, which is really difficult to achieve, I think, unless you're a bigger community where you've got a critical mass of, undeveloped or property that's ripe for redevelopment, and you make that a priority over a number of years. I think then it's a little easier. In smaller communities like ours that happen to be affluent and, again, focused on single-family redevelopment, it's really difficult, if not impossible. So that's where I had mentioned here that it's always been a good gesture from our part and other communities, but not realistic. And that's why we should look at something that's more realistic, aside from what the state says.
are there studies in communities like ours, like 2%, 3%? Are there hard numbers like that are thrown out there, or is it just something we're gonna look into?
The other numbers are interesting in the other communities we look at, but I think looking at what actually is successful in those communities, like Highland Park has had some success over the years. Again, very different community geographically, very affluent, but something where maybe there's ideas from there you could borrow to start to implement now that come to fruition, 5, 10, 15 years from now. So I think more than the numbers, we probably look at the practices and the ordinances, the requirements that they've put into place that have worked, and not just in Chicago area, looking elsewhere too.
But we have so little apartments.
Right.
I mean, we have to be way, way at the bottom of proportion of apartments to single standing residents to put any sort of numbers on this. I don't see how it'd be feasible. We have
Yeah.
a handful of apartments.
Yeah, there's no doubt going to be difficult, and that's why folks that I've talked to in communities that have had some small success say just start now so that you can see the results, a decade plus from now.
So this is a very long term.
Yeah. So it's feasible to think that part of our plan would be to develop a more strategic plan. That would be our plan.
Yeah, something that
Okay.
has more specifics in it. This plan was good, but it was more developer-driven. If a developer came forward and said, I'd like to develop this because I can get some credits from the state for it, which happens in some communities, then we would entertain that. Well, our market really doesn't support that here. Somewhere else, Evanston, other communities, it might support that a little bit more, and it has, but here it just, and other communities like us, it hasn't come to fruition. So, something that's got teeth actually in it, that's got some reality is what we would aim for, and what we would bring to you.
I know I'm jumping ahead and probably mixing apples and oranges, but I noticed in the information about the TIF district, there's notation of multifamily properties that would remain unchanged. Is there not opportunity to look at these issues together, or again, am I mixing apples and oranges?
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
So
Which
there's
is
within
TIF
the,
funding?
within the TIF district, with the different types of properties within it, there's some noted as currently multifamily housing, and it says would remain unchanged. I just, again, I'm probably mixing apples and oranges. I'm just wondering.
I think those are, it's because of their state, their condition, they're good, and so they wouldn't qualify for.
Okay. Okay, so I am mixing apples and oranges. I just wondered, as we're looking at both of these topics, do they
But
at
you're
all
right, I
fit
mean, that's
together?
what, I think it does give us an opportunity to maybe look at something. I mean, what's against us is that we're so landlocked and we
Right.
have so little property to work with, and then I think for any developer, for it to be economically feasible
Right.
for them to do it, they have to build a rather large structure, which we don't have those kinds
Right.
of lots, right? And there may be other reasons too, but certainly something that Marty and his department can, look into and see, as he said, what best practices are and potentially come up with something.
Okay, again, sorry to
But
jump
you're
ahead
right.
on that one.
No. Good point. Okay, thank you. Anything else, trustee Jen?
Nothing.
All right, thank you for your report. Moving on, agenda item number 4, Finance Committee, trustee Rudolph.
Thank you, President Gallagher. First, we'll be addressing later in the omnibus, the resolution approving a budget amendment. We talked about this at the last meeting, but it wasn't actually included in the omnibus. It was just the $3,000 rebate, the HP rebate, that we need to have a budget amendment reflecting the addition to the budget, right? So it's just cleanup from our last meeting that you'll find that on the omnibus.
Okay.
Next is also found in your packet was a draft ordinance for the second tranche of the roadway referendum bonds. It's $3.5 million. And just pursuant to the November 16 referendum, the bond sale is going to occur on September 23rd in the morning. And then that evening at our meeting, we'll finalize the actual ordinance that you see the draft for in our packet, because we, at that time, will know the buyer as well as the interest rate. So that's just a bit of a heads up that will be occurring. Next, the Thomas Ford Memorial Library Building Maintenance Levy request. This is a standard process. It's an annual request from the library board, where they request their building maintenance tax of 0.02%. So we have received that from them. Again, it
Is
is.
it the same every year? The same amount? Okay, that was not clear to me from when I was
Right.
reviewing. Same percentage, I mean. Every year it's the same. Oh, okay. So it's just a procedural.
Yes, they are not authorized to have.
I didn't think so. Okay. Sure, of course, but I was like, this is not a different number than in the past. Okay.
Or a pass-through, and that
Yeah.
percentage is set by state law.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to double check that this
Yep,
isn't
yeah,
an
no, good
additional
question, and
levy. Okay.
It is the procedure, and
Okay.
every year we look at it at about this time.
Okay, great.
Okay, and then lastly, just also for your information, we recently had the Moody's review, and Director Turi informs me that it went very well, and the results are not yet posted, but they reaffirmed or affirmed our AA2 rating.
Oh, wonderful.
We're not home rule, so we can't be any higher than that, so That's
Right.
great news to receive that, so thanks for sharing that this
Yeah,
evening,
yeah,
Director Turk.
Yeah, we're not home rule and we're in Illinois, so very good. Thank you.
Any questions on any of those? All right, otherwise, no further report.
Thank you, Trustee Rudolph. Moving on to agenda item number 5, Public Health and Safety Committee. Trustee Siverman.
Thank you, President Gallagher. There are 5 items that come to this body out of the September 5th Public Health and Safety Committee meeting. Backup materials on these subjects are included in your packets. The first 4 are presented for our edification only and require no board action. The first item is a proposal advanced by LTAC Executive Director Mike O'Connor and Chief Buds, and is being considered by the LTAC Joint Operations Board to mitigate a multitude of serious police and fire department radio communication coverage gaps discovered in all 3 member communities. These coverage gaps and system infirmities threaten both the safety and security of our residents and first responders. They range from scratchy transmissions to altogether failed communications sent to or transmitted to various dead zones. LTAC's thoughtful and comprehensive remedy to this problem is to utilize available state consolidation reimbursement grant funds to purchase a state-of-the-art Starcom radio system produced by Motorola. A most comprehensive PowerPoint slide presentation prepared by E.D. O'Connor is included in your packets. The cost of this new system will not exceed $670,000. Is part of LTAC's annual budget, will have no detrimental impact on other LTAC capital needs, keeping a reserve of over $900,000 in reserve, and will not require any additional funds from the 3 participating municipalities. Joining the Starcom radio network will not only broaden and clarify police and fire radio communications, but will also interface more effectively with other local law enforcement entities. It will allow LTAC to remain fiscally sound as a premier consolidated dispatch center with modern equipment, facilities, and enlightened leadership. The LTAC Board of Directors is scheduled to consider this matter on September 16th. The village is well served by the leadership and advocacy demonstrated by E.D. O'Connor and Chief Buds on this issue. Any questions?
No, I wanted to say, I think it's a good move in the right direction where we'll be able to have this interoperability between other state agencies as well as between fire and police too. I think it's a good step in the right direction.
We're told that radios that will be carried with police personnel in southern Illinois will be as clear as a bell in communication with this new system, this new Starcom system.
I don't know if that's a benefit or not.
The next item, the police department will participate in the National Child Passenger Protection Week by providing free child safety seat checks and installation assistance on Saturday, September 21st, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. near the rear entrance of the police department. Certified child passenger safety technicians will be on hand to assist in the installation of car seats that ensure appropriate fitting for age, weight, and height. There's a flyer in our packets, and the information is posted on the police department website. The police department will once again participate in Illinois Rail Safety Week, September 22nd through the 28th, in conjunction and with the support of the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, Operation Lifesaver, and together with other regional public safety partners. In 2018, there were over 2,200 highway rail grade crossing collisions nationwide, with 109 of those occurring in Illinois, resulting in 17 fatalities and 34 injured. Police officers from the department will participate in this annual life-saving operation by conducting aggressive enforcement and public education activities that week. The next item comes to us in the form of a reminder from Fire Department Division Chief Patrick Gallagher through Chief Patrick Kenny of our duty as trustees and public officials to complete the National Incident Management System and Incident Command System Core Training Curriculum. These are online courses that explain the organizational structure of emergency management and the necessary operational relationships that must exist. Completion of these courses will generate a certificate that we need to advance to the village administration upon our completion. And then the final item is advanced by Chief Kenny for our review and approval. It is a request to declare a list of fire department equipment as surplus, namely a number of fire department uniform equipment for distribution to a smaller volunteer department that would benefit from its use. The Public Health and Safety Committee requests this matter be advanced to the next omnibus bill with the recommendation for full board approval. That completes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Sifferman. With regard to the NIMS training, is there a deadline to that, or will we be receiving more information?
The Village Manager Velkme has more information that Chief Gallagher gave in terms of access to the training. It's an as soon as possible, because when we apply for any of our federal grants, if you're lucky enough to receive one, they routinely will go through and do spot audits. And if all of our village personnel, including elected officials, aren't up to speed on the NIMS training, that's one of the reasons that they can take a grant away from you.
I
So
will be distributing that tomorrow, so.
Oh, okay.
that you have that
We haven't gotten
information.
the link though, right? Correct? Not yet.
Excuse me?
Last year.
The link.
The link, yes.
Right.
If it's done,
Once it's done.
Once it's
that's
done,
it.
you're done,
You're done.
and yeah.
You don't have to take it again.
Just redo it.
Yes.
it's just the newly
Yes.
elected
And it
people.
prompts you through, so it's, you know, it's hard. Okay.
Yeah, they like to add new information, but so far they haven't done that, thank goodness, so that's good.
Block off a few hours, yeah. It's not hard, but it is
No,
a little
it's time
consuming.
consuming and a lot of initials.
And you can step away for, and pause it, yeah.
Yes, all right, thank you. Thank you, Trustee Sifferman. Moving on now to agenda item number 6, General Government Committee. Trustee Terrell.
Yes, I have 5 items to go through. The first item is that there's an intergovernmental agreement between the Illinois State Toll Highway and Western Springs whereby we are conveying to the tollway warranty deeds covering 2 properties, 2 permanent easements, and a temporary construction easement covering 3 parcels or properties. These are all pursuant to the intergovernmental agreement that we entered into with the tollway back in May of this year. The warranty deeds pertain to land along the toll road. I looked at the map, hopefully I'm getting this right. The property that we are conveying in fee simple, along the toll road north of the railroad up to about Western Avenue, which is coincidentally where I live, along with a parcel along the railroad north of 55th Street. The permanent easements run just south of Hillgrove from the toll road east. I couldn't tell exactly what the north-south street was, but I imagine near the pool. And also a spot up by Ogden and along the toll road between 51st and 53rd along Commonwealth. The temporary easement is along Hillgrove, and there's another spot on Burlington. The permanent easement and the temporary easements are so that the toll road can do the work, or the work can be done for the BNSF railroad construction and the shoe fly. The permanent, the fee simple land that we are conveying to the toll road is so that they could do the construction on the toll road. Now, the toll road will not pay the village any direct compensation for the land parcels and the easement rights, but we will receive value from the toll road, which will far exceed the value of the property that we are conveying, such as the value to the pedestrian underpass and also the pedestrian bridge that the tollway will be providing us. We considered this conveyance at our general government meeting, and we decided to recommend that the village board approve the conveyance and easements tonight. It'll be on the omnibus in a few minutes. There's no questions on that. The second item concerns the establishment of the Downtown North Tax Increment Financing District. As you are aware, we had a study conducted regarding the eligibility of the Downtown North TIF. The study's included in the packet. It's got pictures. It's very informative. It's about 50 or 60 pages, but it's certainly easy to read. You can also see in the packet that we are required to establish and adhere to, under the law, the TIF district's scheduling. The next step, now that we have received and reviewed the eligibility study and the redevelopment report, is to adopt an ordinance calling for a joint review board meeting and a public hearing. These are two separate meetings to consider the designation of the North TIF district. The joint review board is set for 3 p.m. on Monday, September 30th, 2019, right here. The joint review board consists of members of various taxing bodies. There's one representative and one public member from each body. Alice, you'll be representing the village.
Yes.
They will make an advisory recommendation in writing considering the concerns with the North TIF district. We must also provide notice to the taxing bodies and the residents within 750 feet of the North TIF, as required by statute, notifying them of the public hearing set here at 7 p.m. on November 11th, 2019. I think that's one of our workshop hearings. So we'll be doing that concurrently. The ordinance providing for these two notices are contained in tonight's omnibus. The next item concerns the updated general guidelines and small cell wireless facility design. We passed an ordinance last year that governs the establishment of small wireless facilities within the village. In the ordinance, we anticipated separate design standards for the small cell facilities. We need to adopt this ordinance so that the telecommunications providers seeking to instill these small wireless facilities will be required to comply with our requirements in the further apparatus. The General Government Committee, we did discuss a resolution for adopting written design standards for small wireless facilities and the draft general guidelines for small wireless facility design, stealth, and concealment standards. The committee and the members of the village staff have provided comments that are being addressed at this time. The final version will be brought to the village board workshop on October 14th for consideration. The fourth item on the agenda involves amendments to our leases with the telecommunications providers who have leased out spaces on the Spring Rock Water Tower and also the Garden Market Water Tower site. We heard earlier about how much money we're spending on these water towers. Here we're actually getting something back. There's a number of these leases that will need board action to amend the leases for the cellular apparatus which are on the water towers and extend out the leases another 5 years beyond that. We will first need an amendment. Actually, it's a third amendment between the village and New Singular Wireless, AT&T, for $19,300 per year as of 2/1/2020 for a 5-year term. We also have in the third amendment an extension for 4 additional 5-year terms on top of that, with a 5% increase written in for each 5-year term. There is also a first amendment to a lease agreement that we have with T-Mobile. That's at the Garden Market Water Tower site. That's for $1,750 a month as of September 1st of 2019, so we're already into this. We will have in this amendment an extension for 5 5-year terms with a 10% monthly rent increase starting with the new terms each 5-year term. Finally, we have a first amendment to a lease agreement we have with Verizon for the Spring Rock Water Tower and the Garden Market Water Tower that's $24,000 per year. That's a 5-year term also beginning on September 1st of 2019. We have in the amendment an extension for 4 consecutive 5-year terms renewable with a 10% yearly increase after that. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, regarding Village Manager Velkme's contract, we discussed the contract in executive session, and we will have a contract in place for the village manager very soon. I think it's a couple of weeks or maybe less than that.
Thank
Is that
you.
correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Other than that, that would conclude my report.
Thank you very much, Trustee Terrell.
Can I just
Yes.
update on the TIF?
Yes.
I would request that we take the TIF ordinance tonight, which is item number 9, if we could postpone that and take action on that at the September 23rd meeting.
Okay.
I anticipate it will be an omnibus agenda item unless there's any issues. The reason for postponing it is I received very late today communication from Cook County Clerk, the mapping department. We always have when we create a TIF, we always have the mapping department confirm the legal description and the PINs to make sure, since the mapping department will ultimately create the tax bills and create the actual taxing district formally. They had some issues with a couple lots that were designated in the TIF district. Our surveyor has responded to those very promptly, but there wasn't enough time for digestion by Cook County staff to get an answer back to us. I believe our legal description is correct based on what our surveyor did, and that the pins that the county indicated were not included within the legal description are in fact within the description. But this extra couple weeks will give us the opportunity to make sure Cook County Clerk's Office is 100% on board with our TIF legal and PIN list. What that does is it sets our schedule back 2 weeks, which doesn't, our schedule has about 4 weeks of play in there to make sure we can still get through the end of this year and approve the TIF by the end of the year if that's the board's pleasure. So it's not going to impact the approval of the TIF. We will still be able to meet our December final action item deadline. It also allows us this extra 2 weeks. I have to do a significant mailing to properties within 750 feet of the TIF district and to all the taxing bodies and interested parties. Some of those mailings involve sending out a notice that includes the legal description and the PINs. I want to make sure it's correct before I do that mailing and incur those costs, because I don't want to have to do it a second time in case the county is correct. So I just want to clarify, why I'm requesting a 2-week continuance. And if everything's copacetic, I would just recommend it go on omnibus, and then, it could be, dealt with, if you didn't want to have any discussion at that next meeting, it could just be, handled on the omnibus with no further discussion.
So do I need a
Okay.
motion to remove it from tonight's?
No, we'll just remove it from tonight's omnibus agenda and then motion it up at the next meeting or when.
Yeah, I'll just make sure it's on the agenda either as a new action item, if I need to discuss anything else with you at the next meeting. If I don't, you'll just see it on the omnibus for the 23rd, and then you can handle it. And if anybody wants to pull it off for further discussion in 2 weeks, that's your prerogative. But if there were no questions tonight or 2 weeks from now, it could just be handled as an omnibus item.
Well, and that's what I wanted to say too. Trustee Terrell, you had quite a bit of information in your committee report. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
I just have, the criteria that we meet in the report, is that pretty typical? I mean, is it same as or really similar to the criteria that we had met for the South TIF district?
Yes, it's very similar to the creation of the North TIF district with its eligibility criteria is very similar to the
Okay.
South criteria. It's sort of a mirror.
Okay.
And we actually have Mike Huffman from TESCA who
Right.
did the eligibility
Oh.
report here in the audience. If you do have questions for him, beyond what I can handle, he can certainly, step up and answer any questions.
Okay, gotcha.
Just to that one point.
Yep.
The one difference is that back when we did it last time, we were still in a period where equalized assessed values were declining. That has changed now, so we don't have that change in EAV factor, but all the other ones are very similar to what we have.
Okay, I had another EAV question too. So it said that the current EAV is 9.2 million, and then it says upon redevelopment estimated at 32.3 million.
Right.
Is there any time frame assigned to that, or kind of?
23 years.
23 years, okay, all right. I
That's the
didn't
life
think it
of a
was like
TIF, yeah.
5. Okay, and that's all.
Mike, but when you had this before with the South, was there a lot of citizens' comments? Is there something we should prepare for based on what you saw when the South TIF? None of us were here for the South TIF.
No, there really wasn't much controversy or
Okay.
issue with it.
Taxing districts were generally supportive of it, residents generally supportive of it. You did have one major property that was vacant for a number of years, Tischler, and that was the driver of that TIF. It's a little different. We don't have one, large site that is, we're looking to create this TIF to sort of be a single project TIF or a driver for it. This is more of a corridor that we're trying to, bring some enhancement to.
Yeah,
That's
the different taxing bodies usually will ask a lot of questions, but I don't really anticipate any major problems with this, but that's probably where most of the questions would come.
Do they do that at the JRB or at
Yeah.
the village? Okay.
The GRB.
At the JRB, if there's something they're not happy with coming out of the JRB, they might come to you, but typically we can resolve it at the JRB.
I did have one question about the designation of being a conservation area as opposed to blight. Is there any distinction, is that just because we aren't in a condition of blight, but we still qualify for the TIF?
Yeah, conservation area essentially says, you're not blighted yet, but if you don't do some things to address some of these issues, you might become blighted. So it gives you an opportunity to address problems before they become major problems, essentially.
I see.
We call it blight light. You're not blight yet, but you're trending that way.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so this is remedial steps to make sure you move in the opposite direction.
Is that 35 years on the building? I kept reading that. Is that roughly the,
Buildings.
Yeah, that's the
Cut
magic
off.
number of the TIF Act, is the cutoff of 35 years. So
The
we're certainly
buildings-
older than that. Yes,
Buildings
buildings.
over 35 years, yes, which we have a pretty high percentage of, right?
they fall into the light?
Mm.
Okay.
Any
That's
other
just a
questions?
euphemism. That's not in
I
the
know,
act.
exactly.
That's not in the act.
Right.
That's just a euphemism.
Easy to
Yep.
understand.
Yep.
Hey, I thought the report was
Yeah.
really interesting and thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the TIF or anything else coming out of general government? Nope. Then moving on to new business, we have agenda item number 7, but we will not be taking action on that tonight. So we will be adjourning to a closed session regarding that, but no action will be taken on that this evening. So move on to consideration of an action on agenda items during the special meeting portion of our combined meeting. The omnibus vote is authorized by the Illinois state statutes, which allow a municipality to collectively vote on a group of ordinances, resolutions, and other motions, such as awards of contract, appointments, etc. This is known as an omnibus vote. All the items contained on the omnibus vote list have been previously discussed by the President and Board of Trustees on at least one occasion, and often on several occasions. By placing them on the omnibus vote list, a single vote may be taken to approve them. A trustee may remove any item from the list and have it discussed and voted on separately prior to the omnibus vote. Is there any such request this evening? Hearing none, trustee Terrell.
President Gallagher, I move that the following ordinances, resolutions, and motions as contained on the meeting agenda for September 9th, 2019 be adopted and/or approved under an omnibus vote. Agenda item number 8, ordinance 19-2968, approving and authorizing the execution of a warranty deed, that's pins 18-07-400-067 and 18-06-318-032, a grant of a permanent easement, parcel TW 5-16-039.P, a grant of permanent easement, that's parcel TW 5-16-070.01P, and a temporary construction easement, parcel numbers TW 5-16-07.01.T, TW 5-16-070.02T, and TW 5-16-070.03.T for conveyance of real property and easements to the Illinois State Toll Highway to construct certain improvements to the Tri-State Tollway I-294 and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, a BNSFRR Bridge MP.26.6, Bridge number 261, and other village public infrastructure improvements. Item number 10, Resolution 19-2502, approving a budget amendment and transfers over $10,000 to the fiscal year 2019 operating budget in the Capital Improvements Fund.
Thank you. You got off light tonight. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Clerk Horvath, may we have the roll call vote, please?
Certainly, President Gallagher. Trustee Terrell.
Aye.
Trustee Zifferman.
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph.
Aye.
Trustee John.
Aye.
Trustee Fink.
Aye.
Trustee Chen.
Aye.
And President Gallagher.
Aye.
All approved.
Thank you. Moving on to the reports. My report this evening, with your approval, I would like to reappoint Brian Cronin to the Liquor Commission for a 3-year term at next meeting to expire in June 2022. I'm grateful he's agreed to another term and look forward to his service. On August 20th, I attended the Chicago Metropolitan Area Planning Council of Mayors Executive Committee, where we discussed the STP project selection criteria. STP is the avenue where federal funds are distributed regionally. They recently expanded that to have 2 categories now. There's the STP local, which is what we are funding Central Avenue with. But then there's a STP regional, which is larger in scope. So the project selection criteria is new, and that was discussed, but it's still in development. Over the next year, CMAP will be investigating impacts of e-commerce on transportation, land use, fiscal condition, and environment, and they'll report back on their findings. We also discussed regional population growth trends, which are not very positive for the region as a whole, but some areas are thriving and others are not. So they will be looking at that too and how to make that more equitable. Some notable trends in the population growth is that senior populations continue to grow throughout our region, and there is a definite preference noted for walkable communities. Finally, you probably are aware that there was a consent order approved on Friday for the go-ahead for Sterigenics to apply for permits to come within the new legislation to look to start their operations again. Our state legislators have been active in authoring and sponsoring legislation, and with this newest development, they have vowed to advance more legislation to impose stringent regulations on the opening or on the release of ethylene oxide in populated communities, including giving municipalities the authority to ban the use of ethylene oxide in their community. So we stand with our state legislators, and we will keep you apprised as this continues to develop. And that concludes my report. Village Manager Belkney?
Thank you, President Gallagher. We have been very busy here at Village Hall with all of our water issues and so forth. And we also have the new garbage program that is going into effect January 1st. All residents received this brochure, and they can come in and take a look at which type of cart they would like to have. We have them here at Village Hall, right outside the boardroom here. We also have them at the train station and the recreation center also. So there has been a lot of interest in that. So you need to make a decision by January 1st on this. Just want to remind everyone on that. Also, the village will be posting updates on the I-294 expansion project as we receive them. So if you could please visit our webpage to receive the most up-to-date information. And also, I'd like to encourage everyone to sign up for the community alerts, because that information is something that we send out that might be very new and interesting, and especially with the water situation. That was an avenue that we used for getting the information out to the residents. So I encourage everyone to sign up for that. Internally, we have begun the budget meetings, and we should have that, the committee meetings will have the budget overview from your departments and so forth. So that concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Can't believe it's that time of year already where we're facing
is.
budget. Thank you very much, Manager Velkme. Village Attorney Jurisik.
No further report tonight.
Thank you. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to recess to close meeting.
I would make a motion to recess to a closed meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, so for the purpose.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. My motion would be recess closed meeting for the purpose of discussion of pending litigation under 5 Illinois compiled statute 122-C11 or prominent or imminent litigation 5 ILSC 120-2C11.
Second.
Thank you. Maybe we have a roll call vote, please, Clerk Horvath.
Certainly, President Gallagher. Trustee Chen,
Yes.
Trustee Fink,
Aye.
Trustee John,
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph,
Aye.
Trustee Sifferman,
Aye.
and Trustee Terrell.
Aye.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in closed session. When we come out, we will only entertain a motion to adjourn. We will not discuss any other matters after our closed session. Thank you for your attendance. Good evening.
We thought there would be excitement.
A lot of work tonight.